I think we should start with what is AI42? AI42 is a philosophical and technical framework. It's intended to guide organizations to embarking on new artificial intelligence and machine learning initiatives. At its core, there are 5 pillars that center around the framework: ethics, strategy, architecture, governance, and impact. These pillars encompass all of the key elements that DOS42 has identified as being crucial to consider and plan for implementing AI and ML solutions to our client organizations. Today, I'm joined by Teresa and Logan, 2 of the architects of AI42 and the co-writers of the AI42 white paper. The white paper is DOS42's vision for safe, strategic, and scalable AI data analysis applications. Welcome, Logan and Teresa. So I'd like to pick your brains a bit about some of the particulars of the white paper. It's quite lengthy and very, very rich with content. So my first question is for you, Teresa, in terms of when we think about the need to balance automation, how do you sort of balance that need of automation with the importance of maintaining that human touch for customer interactions?
Yeah, so I think the main use case that we think about when we're thinking about that need for balance would probably be chatbots. And do we want to have a chatbot? Do we want to have a human agent who's speaking to someone? And I think there is there's quite a spectrum of options that people have for automation within that. So you can have human agents be the ones who are interacting with people. You can have chatbots be the ones who are interacting with people. And a lot of people, when they're thinking about it, they keep it to that dichotomy. They're thinking, do I have human? Do I have chatbot? What do I need? But there's actually a rich tapestry of options in between that. You can have both. So you can have people who are interacting have the option to opt in to say, you can call our phones or you can use our chatbot on our site. You can have, that can either be an opt-in or it can be based on different use cases. So if you're just checking the status of your order, you don't need a human to do that. And it's going to be frustrating if you want a human to do that and you're at hours, you want to check the status of your order and it's 1 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, well, I have to wait and do it between business hours tomorrow. That's not a good experience. So it's good to have something that is automated that can do those functions that are very simple. You can also have, and one of the use cases that we're seeing and that we're talking about with one of the clients that Logan and I are working with is the potential to have a chatbot that your call agents are using. And so the chatbot can use retrieval augmented generation and help the human agents to find the information that people are looking for. So then you still have the human touch, but the human agents are that much more effective, don't have to dig through mountains of documentation themselves, don't have to have the entire catalog of documentation memorized and know exactly where to look for things. They can have that touch themselves. I do think that there are use cases that it's very important to continue to have human agents. And one of the things that we talk about in the white paper, there's a fairly famous case where an eating disorder hotline tried to replace human agents with AI. And the AI gave advice that was actively harmful to people. Similarly, there was a suicide hotline that did the same thing. These are examples of use cases where we should not try to replace the human touch with AI. Is there a potential value in doing what I was just suggesting, empowering those agents with some form of AI, perhaps? But no, those are high sensitivity situations. We do not want to entrust the AI with those sorts of situations because the risk is too high. So that's one of the things that we're assessing. So there are really 4 questions that we recommend that organizations ask at this phase. Is this a task that humans are good at? Is this a task that humans enjoy? What is the risk of an incorrect decision? And what level of oversight is required? Yeah. So yeah, that's sort of my framework, and I think the way to think about it, but definitely not just a binary.
Great. I love the fact that you were contrasting some of those use cases and what makes sense for AI and what doesn't. Logan, my question is for you next around what are some specific examples where you've seen AI successfully alleviate some dangerous or even tedious tasks in the workplace?
Yeah, good question. I think tedious is the easier one to identify. I'm sure all of us up here, everyone in the room, has worked on something and thought to themselves, a computer could do this. So the ones that are top of mind for me are things like document processing, where clerical type work, where traditionally you would have someone parsing through paper documents, PDFs, to extract bits and pieces of quantitative data. Something that, if we're all being honest, relatively low skill work. And there's also actually a downside to humans have short attention span. So, you mix up a column and suddenly your data quality goes down. So, use cases like that where you can use document processing, vision AI to tackle some of that. Other things, sentiment analysis and like clustering models that help bucket users or whoever your stakeholder group is into different segments. Those are tasks that are cognitively kind of heavy, but can be offloaded to one of these workloads. Dangerous, I guess that sort of depends on your definition of dangerous. I mean, my mind goes to people's physical safety. And in that case, for manufacturing companies, logistics companies, fleet services companies, anything that they can do with predictive, like anomaly detection type models to forecast, replacing equipment or servicing something earlier in its life cycle, and then bring the chance of some, physical danger down is common use case.
What are some of the key factors that you would suggest a client or customer consider when they're thinking about automating a task with AI?
So I'll go back to the framework of the four, and I'll focus on the first two because these are ones that are near and dear to my heart. And in the ethics section is this something that humans are good at? Is this something that humans enjoy? So something like art, thinking about the impact on your people, thinking about the impact on if you have a group of, designers who are doing great work for your company and you go, nah, we don't need that anymore. We can have AI do the design instead. That's bad for the morale at your company. So that's the enjoyment piece of it, I think, is also important, not just is this something that people are good at? And I guess that's an example that's a little bit more binary, but like if there's a part of people's jobs that you could automate, as opposed to taking the whole job away, there's a part of this job that you could automate, that person would be more efficient, and you just took their favorite part of their job away. Yeah. That's not going to be good for efficiency, even if it looks like on the surface, like, oh, I could save them 4 hours a week. It's like, and they're not going to like it. Mm-hmm. So you got to think about the impact on the humans in your company and what their perception of it is going to be. You're also going to have to do change management, because some people don't want, have the fear of being replaced by machines wholesale and don't want, are afraid of AI at all. Yeah. And you're going to have to encounter that and figure out how to speak to that and how to help people to understand why you're making the choices that you're making. Yeah. But yeah, I think for me, those two first ones are really important. About if it's something that people are bad at, like, document processing. Because one of the other, when you were talking about document processing, I was thinking one of the counterpoints that I've heard for that is people go, well, what if the document can't read people's handwriting? Guess what? People are not great at reading people's handwriting either. Yep. So, sometimes you do want a second opinion, but it's not like that's a task that humans are uniquely great at. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's great that you called out something that I think is central and core to the AI42 offering, and that is, I think DOS42, we see AI as an augmentation of human capacity, right? So it's not meant to replace a human or replace anything or take anything away, but rather to augment what humans do. And Teresa, I liked your comment around just the organizational impact, because I think oftentimes in technology, right, we're focused on efficiency and process and cost, right, and leaving out that human element. So it's really refreshing to hear that AI42 in its offering, and the white paper specifically, speaks to that. So Logan, I want to go back to something that you had mentioned about the organizational dynamics of AI. And so what are some steps that organizations can take to make their AI processes more transparent and understandable for non-technical users, or to Teresa's point, like maybe users who are just maybe a little apprehensive of AI?
Yeah, it's a great question. Honestly, there's a lot. I think one of the best early steps that an organization can take is really taking the same approach that they do with self-serve business intelligence, right? Most predictive models, AI models, have really complex math and statistics behind them. But the same way that you wouldn't ask a business user to go out and run a complex SQL query to get a result, you wouldn't expect them to be able to interpret a model right off the bat. So building things like dashboards that show feature importance and can visually represent how a model is reaching a certain outcome to end users is a really valuable pursuit. Under transparency, I would say there's sort of the two pillars of explainability, which really gets to being able to, for individual predictions or individual outcomes for a model, providing users with the reasoning for how the model got to that point. If you think about use cases where you're predicting something or making a business decision that will actually affect a stakeholder. So the decision of whether or not to hire or approve for credit, whatever your business is, it's often really important to be able to articulate either to that candidate or person who that decision affects how you got to that point. Designing systems that can output those sorts of human readable results is one really big step.
Yeah, I think there's a storytelling component to what you're saying too, like sort of taking what people are doing, like maybe it's interpreting the results of a dashboard, a KPI or an insight, and then maybe comparing that with doing the same thing with a chatbot or with something that has an AI component to it, and sort of telling the story of how it makes that process more efficient. Maybe would even save that person some time, alleviate some stress, going back to the human element of AI, right? So there's, I think, a broader story that you touch on there, which I think is very important. Teresa, I want to go back to you a bit on one of the pillar that you and I keep talking about, ethics, which I think is a key differentiator for AI42 and specifically DOS42's AI service offering, because it's a component of AI that I think isn't often touched upon. And I know you have some great opinions about it. So talk to us a bit about how important is it for companies to really consider the ethical sourcing of data for AI training?
So I think this is a really important point. Going back just to the sort of heart of the question a little bit, I also want to say I think a lot of tech companies they think that the companies that we're trying to serve only care about the money and the efficiency. And what we find is that no, companies do care about their people. Maybe not all of them, but that, when you approach someone and you go, you could save this much money, you're not giving them the whole picture, and they want that. And so that's something that we're seeing that I think is really encouraging, that people are responding well in the market to our ethics stance. So ethical sourcing is one of the major concerns with a lot of large language models. Large language models are fairly indiscriminate in what they're scraping in the internet. They may be scraping content. The larger models are scraping content that should be copyright protected. And so that's one thing that has to be considered of, which of these models are you using? Do you have a mandate from your organization that you do not use a model that has copyright material? And one of the potential concerns with that is that at some point in time in the future, I'm sure there are legal challenges going on right now for that. And so are we going to be using this model that's working super well, and then all of a sudden it's going to be undercut and it's not going to work as well when they have to pull back a large part of the content that it's been trained on? So we do have some organizations that we work with that say, I don't want to use those big models. And fortunately, Snowflake does have a variety of different large language models available, including Snowflake Arctic, their own native one. So the other element of data sourcing is, so that's on the large language model side. On the machine learning side, it's very important for compliance and governance that you are able to, if someone does under one of the consumer protection laws that is out there today, say, I do not want my data to be, I want you to delete my data. I don't want you to have a part of my data anymore. You need to be able to retrain your model on on the cadence that you retrain it, not necessarily within 24 hours of that request. There are protections in place for that. But you need to be able to identify where this person's data was in the model. And so you need to know that you are ethically creating your model in such a way that you haven't completely stripped it of information such that you couldn't go in and say, I'm taking this person's information out. And that you don't have to start from scratch every time. You can just pull this piece out. So I think that's part of the ethics concern of it, is just making sure that you are able to discriminate, that you're able to say, I do or do not want this given piece of information in at a later date, after you've done the initial training, and do a retraining that is, respectful of consumers' wishes in that way.
And if I could jump in on that too, we talk a lot about data foundations at DOS42. The principles are really no different when it comes to AI. The same best practices that you would take to prevent from letting PII, PHI pop up in a dashboard that it's not supposed to be in, they're the same steps that you would take to prevent them from flowing into a predictive model. So, having good tag-based policies in your data warehouse, and having governance processes that make auditing everything in the system simple are all the core steps to keeping models clean and compliant.
Yeah. It's such a big topic, and there's just so much to dive into on ethics. I have a question for you both, a little off script here, around of all the things that you're talking about, and all of the areas that the white paper goes deep into. For you both, where do you suggest clients start? Where's the one place, the first, maybe even a step zero, but what's the one thing that you would want clients and people who are interested in AI workloads, specifically when it comes to ethical sourcing and ethical use of AI, where do you suggest people start?
It's important to understand what you do and don't have. So this is not what people think of as the first, sexy AI step, but data cataloging. Let's see what we do have. Let's see what we don't have. Let's see, what our level of data quality is in these things. Because if you have junk data and you put junk data into your machine learning models, or your, whatever sort of AI or ML you're going to do, you're going to get junk results out. So that's really for those organizations that, this is a necessary first step, which I would argue is probably a lot of organizations. You at least need to do the assessment, because no organization has perfectly clean data for every data domain that they have. Some of them have very clean business-ready data sets for some things, and then for this other thing, we just onboarded this system and we're still working through it. And you have to know, maybe this one is not machine learning ready yet. So I think that's where I would start with a lot of organizations. Logan, do you have?
Yeah. To go back to the question, were you specifically focused on ethics, or just a general first step for?
I was interested in ethics specifically because it's such a unique topic, and something that I think is a clear differentiator for DOS42's perspective on AI in the industry and in the workplace. Because when you look at other sort of AI offerings or AI tools in the marketplace, they generally start with interoperability, fitting into the architecture, use cases, workloads, cost, right? All of the areas that our white paper goes really, really deep on. But this is a unique topic and something that's very, very special to our perspective. So because it is unique, I'm just curious if there's a first step there that you would suggest that people look at when they're trying to understand, or maybe even unpack, and maybe even see, to Teresa's point, is this the right first step for us?
Yeah, I have two, and I would say do them in parallel. First one, a little pragmatic, but compliance and regulation is usually aimed at driving a positive outcome, and it's often aimed at ethical outcomes. So a good sort of trailing indicator for how you can operate ethically when it comes to setting up AI is look at what's been regulated so far. I know not the exciting answer, but yeah, understanding that in different industries, there's certain types of decisions and certain data inputs that cannot be used to disqualify someone. I think I used the example earlier of credit approval. There are certain types of personal loans where you cannot use pieces of demographic information or like anything about that person to make a decision on their approval or denial. So starting there, right, seeing what is on the books. And the other thing on the total other end of the spectrum, and this is, I would challenge leaders at companies to ask themselves this question regularly is, how would you feel if a decision about your credit approval or your, application to a job was done through an automated system? And if your answer is, for this use case we're looking at, it would not feel too good, that's a good gut check. Not a hard, fast rule, but a good way to get a sense.
That's good. Yeah, that kind of directionally consistent, right? Okay. Teresa, I want to go to you a bit about, when we think about the key considerations, what are some of the key considerations for ensuring that a chosen AI platform can scale to an organization's growth and as the organization evolves? Like when we think about some of those considerations, what are some things that come to mind when choosing an AI platform?
So I think when we come into an organization that is, again, relatively speaking, immature in their AI readiness, they don't have a team of data scientists, for example. One of the things that we're looking at is, okay, is this a technology that we can use without having a team of data scientists? But we also want to make sure that we're not locking them into a technology that is not going to be useful once they do have data scientists. We don't want to introduce something to you that once you get mature, you're going to have to migrate. Do you or do you not have data scientists is really, I think, one of the key things in my mind. Then even going into, if we come into an organization that does have data scientists, the ability to scale in a cost-effective manner. So is this something that they're going to be competing with resources on? Like I've definitely seen data science teams where the data scientists and the engineers and the business users using the BI platforms are literally competing for resources. Like they're all going together into a resource pool, and that on Tuesday afternoon that Jan retrains the model, and we're not going to be able to get dashboards, so you need to do the dashboards on Tuesday morning. And that's definitely a key consideration as well.
If I could jump in on that one too, and this sort of goes back to an earlier question you had around transparency and how to make the outputs of these models digestible to everyone from business stakeholders to other analysts in the business. Selecting a platform that has support for that. There's many out there that make things like feature importance graphs and other sorts of model evaluation tools readily available in the platform. It can really act as a self-serve approach to understanding what's behind the scenes with given models. So.